So we're all processing President Biden's speech today. What did you think of the speech, especially given the fact that he didn't say the word filibuster even one time?
Well, Joe Biden, as you know, is a creature of the Senate. He spent, 30 years there? And if you count his 8 years as vice president, which is an officer in the Senate, he spent nearly 4 decades in the Senate. So I did not expect for him to take on the Senate. It's the Senate job to determine exactly how they take up legislation. I think Joe Biden gave a very forceful speech. It was long on what I consider to be on real good foundations about this country and about where we are in the country. And I hope that the leadership of the Senate will pick this up now and do what is necessary to get this done.
Do you think that means that we need to get rid of the filibuster? Is it filibuster or bust, essentially, for voting rights in this country at this moment?
Well, I do believe that if the 10 votes are not there that are necessary to take these two bills up, that the Senate must do what is necessary to take them up. And that means we'll have to change the rule and apply the budget rules to the constitutional issues. And that's what I think it ought to be anyway. I'm not a fan of the filibuster. I don't like it. It's a tradition that we need to get rid of. It's not in the Constitution. It's not a law. But if that's a big tradition you're going to hold on to, let's not allow the filibuster to be applied to constitutional issues like voting.
You've urged President Biden to endorse that filibuster carve-out I mentioned. Today, actually, NPR reports that Vice President Harris is also talking to senators. We know that President Biden is having his own conversations. Have you been involved in any of these conversations between senators and the president or vice president? And how is that going? It's all behind the scenes. So if you have any insights into how those conversations are going, let us know.
Well, I think it should be that way. What I said a couple of days ago was that these kinds of things should not be undertaken at a microphone. You're much better doing it on the telephone. And that's what I said. Now, a lot of people misunderstood that or misapplied that. I think that if you're trying to negotiate a deal, you ought to do it in such a way that everybody comes out of it feeling somewhat of a winner. And you don't do that when you're public with it and don't give people the room they need to address whatever issues they may need to address back in their home states or in their congressional districts. So I think that Kamala Harris is doing a great job. I've talked to her about this. I've talked to Cedric Richmond. I've talked to Steve Ricchetti. And so I've been talking to people, sharing with them the feelings that I'm hearing from people out here among my constituents. I've just had 3 town hall meetings, and I'm getting ready for another one tonight, and I'll have 2 more this week. And I'm listening to people, and I can tell you frustration is building. And so we need to make sure that we don't let that frustration overflow.
What are you hearing in those town halls? What are people saying about these attempts in a variety of states right now to restrict voting rights, essentially for communities of color? I mean, let's never miss what's happening here. Demographics are shifting. States that were traditionally red went blue. And so the response has been to restrict certain groups from voting. What's the reaction been like on the ground in the town halls you're doing?
Well, people are very nervous about 2 things. Number one, they don't think we Democrats do a good enough job of touting our accomplishment. I've spent a lot of time on the American Rescue Act, getting people to understand exactly what we did with the child care tax credit, what happened with the improvements in the Affordable Care Act, what we are doing for Black farmers, etc. That we don't do enough of, they tell me. But they're all very nervous about this voting thing. As you can imagine, here in the South, voting has been a big thing with all of us. I can remember when my parents first started voting unencumbered voting. And so people are nervous about that. And they want to see us. They are buoyed by what's going on down in Texas. And I think that they see that as an articulation of their feelings. And they would like to see how the Senate is going to respond to the Texas representatives. And I think that we ought to respond in a positive way. That would be fulfilling for so many of the people I'm talking to.
I mean, I think one of the things we talk so much about, to your point, is the history in the South, specifically around the issue of voting. And you have such a strong history of civil rights organizing in the South. I think it's important to ask the folks who were there and on the ground, do you see similarities between the voter suppression strategies happening right now in the South and throughout the country and the ones that we saw in the past?
Absolutely. I do see that. It seems to be Jim Crow on steroids. People talk all the time about the Democratic Party was the one that did those things back there when Strom Thurmond was a Democrat. But the fact of the matter is, those people left the Democratic Party because when the Democratic Party decided we are going to be the party for the people, and they started with Truman, with his executive order to integrate the armed services, which remained segregated. Then came Lyndon Baines Johnson with the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing Law. These things were done by Democrats, and that's the reason Strom Thurmond left the Democratic Party, and a lot of other Southern Democrats became Republican. You can go all the way back. Ronald Reagan was a Democrat. He left the Democratic Party. And you can go and check, and you will find they left the Democratic Party of a voting right and civil right. And I challenge any of them to dispute that accurately. They can't do it.
You call it Jim Crow on steroids, and that is strong rhetoric, but I think the reason why I wanted to ask you specifically is because you were there. So when you say this is comparable to Jim Crow, it carries weight. A lot of folks are saying that those kinds of outspoken slogans like defund the police or comparing things to Jim Crow is going, quote unquote, too far. Do you see it that way, or do you think it's important because of the moment we're in for you to use rhetoric that is clear and to the point?
Well, when you look at the facts and apply the fact, and it is a fact that what they did in Georgia, saying that it will now be a criminal act to give somebody a drink of water while they're standing in a line for 5 or 6 hours. If that's not Jim Crow on steroids, tell me what is. So I'm not talking about anything theoretically here. I'm talking about what they put in these laws. When you say that because Black people have so-called souls to the polls, that is almost a religious thing in the Black community. We're going to outlaw souls to the polls. These are facts that's in the law. So I don't argue about anything theoretical. I'm talking about what is fact, what's in the laws that they are passing.
You told the story about meeting your wife in jail while protesting, actually, and I love this story. And previously, we've talked about generational divisions that exist within Black Lives Matter and this generation's movement, if you will, and your generation's movement. Do you see a full year, into this racial reckoning? Do you see your legacy continuing with the younger activists that are organizing today?
Oh, absolutely. I was in North Charleston, South Carolina last night, there with Clay Middleton and others who have been mentees of mine over the years. They are still carrying on this kind of legacy. My daughter Jennifer was there with me last night. She'll be with me tonight in this town hall meeting. They are, in fact, carrying on this legacy. they are dedicated to it, that they are learning the system, and they're going to apply that system in such a way that their grandparents would be proud of them, not to think of their dad.
I love that. I think all of us should try to make our grandparents and our parents proud. That is a true statement. Congressman James Clyburn, thank you so much for taking the time tonight, and please stay safe.
Hi, I'm Zerlina Maxwell. Thanks for checking out our channel on YouTube. You can see more from Zerlina by clicking any of the videos on this screen, and make sure you subscribe below to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. Thanks for watching.